right, so welcome to Inside the Queen's English, and today we have a wonderful guest. We have the one, the only, Max here. So today we are going to dive into identity again. You know, gender identity, it is more than the binary, it is more than non-binary, you know what I mean? It's just this full spectrum of identity and representation. So Max, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm originally from Dayton, Cincinnati, Ohio area, and I live now in St. Louis. I'm a transmasculine person.
So it's interesting you identified as being transmasculine.
Yes.
And common terms used within the gender nonconforming or the transgender community could be transmasculine, transgender, female to male, assigned female at birth, F to M. Of those terms, you chose transmasculine. Why do you feel that that identity, I guess, represents you to the fullest than the others?
I feel like it kind of gives a nod to the idea that there's a spectrum. I was AFAB, assigned female at birth, and I actually didn't start to transition until like a year and 8 months ago. So I lived most of my life as a woman. Of course, I'm gonna have just a lot of female socialization, and I have I'm feminine also. I'm on the masculine spectrum, but that doesn't mean I'm trying to eliminate everything in me that's feminine or female.
Yeah.
I think trans people are just some of the most beautiful people in the world, and I think one of the things that makes us just so profound is that we have these lived experiences of cultural duality, right? So I'm not saying gender is binary, but I'm saying culture imposes that idea. And so I have lived experience as a female. I know what that's like. It's very, very different from how I started to be treated when I started to pass. And
that's interesting.
So I hold those experiences in me, and now as someone who a lot of people would perceive as just a white guy walking into a room, I actually hold this profound experience with me for 29 years of my life that no one, unless they know my story, has any idea about. Right. But that experience informs every single thing that I do, and I don't leave that experience behind as I'm Max now.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
I want to talk about transition, and that can be through many ways of affirming your gender.
So I'm kind of textbook cookie cutter trans guy. When I was really little, when I first began expressing myself, that happened to look like a boy. And on vacation, my parents would even when people would misgender me or be like, oh, your son this, your son that, and they'd be referring to me because that's what I looked like. On vacation, they would just let that shit go. And I loved that when I was little. I loved being on vacation and kind of getting a permission slip to be a boy. I was a boy. I felt like a boy. If you read the DSM-5 and the diagnostics for trans people, there's 5 things, and when I read them in grad school, I was in really deep denial the first time I read the DSM-5. I was like, oh, cool, interesting, flip, didn't faze me. But then when I started going to therapy and kind of unpacking that a little bit, I really looked at all this, and I dug down, and I was like, oh yeah, I recollect having boy bathroom behavior. I asked my family to call me boy names. I told my family that I was a boy. This is I'm 4 and 5 years old. So.
And you said DSM-5.
Okay, so that is a little book that therapists, psychologists came up with. It's a scientific diagnosis, and it's for mental illnesses and things like that. So there's certain there's conversations in our community of it kind of sucks that it's you have to be diagnosed. It's it makes it feel like it's a disease,
right.
And then stigma is attached to it. Trans people, in order to pursue transition, if they want to do that, you can be trans and not pursue your transition. Okay, that's totally fine. So yeah, there could just be a person who's yeah, I'm trans and I'm not going to do anything about it.
That's
I'm going to stay in my body.
Because it's mental. It's not. It's your identity. It's not the physicality of it. The physicality is just affirming what mentally you are.
Correct.
Right.
And there are a ton of reasons people decide not to transition. Like, it could be socially it's too difficult or it's too expensive. It could also just be like, I acknowledge my transness and I just choose not to do anything about it. Like, I just would rather not or whatever. So I've met all kinds of different trans people. But just, yeah, for all intents and purposes, it's a book and it gives certain behaviors that transgender people have in common. And there's like 5 of them, and I had all of them. If I really look back and like look honestly at my childhood. So when I hit puberty, I remember like giving in and being like, okay, I gotta get it together. I gotta be a girl. I gotta figure this out.
Did you have pressure from like your family that's what you needed to do?
Yeah, nothing is like black and white, right? My family in some ways are wonderful and embraced me in a lot of ways that were really, really dignifying and helpful. And then in other ways, it's like, yeah, I mean, like, I grew up in the 90s, like, no one was trans except for, like, these, like, really eccentric people on Maury. I felt like when I'm gonna say transitioned to being a girl, like, so when I was little, I looked like a boy, I gave in and I, like, started looking, like, super feminine. I, like, literally remember I remember like watching my peers and like trying to figure out like how to be a girl. Walk like this, talk like this, like take your voice up at the end of sentences. Like sit like this, not like this, right? Like there's just all these things. And I remember having to like consciously memorize how to be a girl. So I did that, and I actually did that for until I was like 29 and a half years old.
Okay. So what was that moment that just hit you and just said, it's time for me to be authentic, it's time for me to truly be myself and not have to read this manual on how to be someone else?
Yeah. I was 29. I was sitting in bed on a Sunday with my partner, Julia, and like we were watching The Gender Revolution. But I'm watching it, and they just, like, at the very beginning, like, plainly defined what being transgender meant. They just are, like, providing definitions, much like we're doing here.
Right.
And they were like, transgender is when you don't identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. And I was like, I don't know, the, like, queer Holy Spirit. I just... Seriously,
the queer Holy Spirit.
It fell over me. I think I just had so much denial. I had committed so hard to like being feminine. It took a really, really long time for those like layers to be peeled back of all of my like overcompensation, like trying to fit this like femme thing. It took me a really long time to believe that it would be worth it to be myself. And so once I found out, I heard this definition, I started crying, and I looked at Julia, or I think I was quiet for a little while, and I looked at Julia and I was like, I think I'm trans. And it was like that.
And how did she receive it?
Julia was hypersensitive and receptive and caring in that moment. It was difficult. Like there were about 6 months thereafter of conversations, maybe 5 months. With Julia, I had to come out to myself. That was like my coming out to myself, and Julia happened to be there.
So let's just say that again. And I think that's what we all have to realize, is that we have to acknowledge who we are first before we're able to acknowledge who we are to the rest of the world. Yeah. So therefore, like, people may have their assumptions about an individual, but fall back until the individual is able to come out for themselves. I think that's really important.
We had about 5 months of like me starting this journey of like articulating my own identity, figuring that out for myself, doing it with my friends, like slowly introducing my friends and family like throughout that time. I ended up coming out on National Coming Out Day just because I was like, what the hell? It gave me a timeline. I didn't want to like put it off too much, but it gave me enough time to like really like, I'm pretty impulsive, so I really wanted to sit with something that was so important, and I had been in denial about for such a long time. I wanted to really kind of like dig into that and feel like super comfortable and proud when I did end up coming out. So I came out on Instagram to the world and received just like the most hearty like welcome to the world. It was was so fucking awesome. Yeah, it was
I'm joining that
incredible.
applause.
It was just the biggest relief of my life. Like I said, I'm impulsive. I don't really mess around. By the end of that year, so that was October 11th, 2018.
Okay.
I took my first testosterone shot 4 days before that. By December 31st, 2018, I had already had top surgery.
Okay.
And changed my name legally.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, let's go. So for me, those were like the biggest things in my transition, starting hormones and getting my chest removed. Chest removed was even like more urgent at the time. Like I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I think I'm a trans man. I'm gonna like put that out there and like take this risk and do that. But I know for sure, no matter what, I don't want my chest. So I was just like super confident about having that removed. I was just like good without that.
And that was just your moment of just affirming your gender in general, like whether you were conclusive to saying a trans man, but like now transmasculinity fits more, but it's just you knew to affirm yourself there was something that you needed to change with your body, and that was removing what was there and having top surgery.
Yeah, for me. At the beginning of my transition, I think I would have been more like, I'm a man, I'm a guy, I'm a trans man, you know. Once I started transitioning, I started becoming more comfortable with my femininity, more than I ever had in my whole life.
Oh, wow.
So, like, I think that I was, like, before I started presenting and, like, looking and passing as a male, I felt really, like, self-conscious if I would have, like, if I would do something really feminine or, like, you know, I don't know, I like dance like a girl. They're just things that I do that are just like they're just girly, you know? And now I love them and I find that very endearing, and that's just like a part of me. I just take it all. But in the beginning of my transition, I was like, oh, gotta like learn how to be a guy. And it's like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to stop being performative in my expression. I want to figure out who I am. And so much of who I am is rooted in the person that I used to be. I went by Meg, and I just like, I love her, and she brought me here, and in my transition, I don't want to leave her behind, because so much of becoming who I am is just like having integrity. It's about integrity. It's about putting in front of people like who I really am. This is it, not withholding even my past living as a woman now.
Right.
Like it's bringing all of that integrity into my life in every moment, you know.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
And like you said, everyone has their own journey when it comes to their transness, and that's what I'm learning, and that's what I hope to articulate in the Queen's English.
So transition, the process of someone affirming their gender identity when it differs from the gender they were assigned at birth. This is not a process that changes someone from man to woman or vice versa. It's the journey toward living a more authentic life, one that reflects a person's true gender identity and or expression. Medical procedures may be pursued or they may not. I think that's perfect.
Okay.
So yeah, transition for me, like I said, there were like a couple things that I knew once I realized I was trans that I wanted to do, and that was start hormones, and that was get top surgery.
Okay.
And those are still the only things in my transition that I'm pursuing. I like thankfully
Get that close up. Get that close up.
of growing a nice facial hair. Oh, I would say the one other thing in my transition is working out.
Okay.
Like working out is a huge part of my transition. One, it helps my mental health, just to be working out consistently. And I need that like extra support more so than I did like when I was living as a woman. Just, I don't know, I just kind of like, I didn't really care how I looked. I think it was like actually like a subtle form of like self-hate. I was fine, you know, I wasn't like, I'm not saying anything like bad about how I looked, but I think that once I transitioned, I started looking at myself being like, I love that person. I want to take care of that person. I want to really feel healthy, like in a holistic way.
Yeah.
But then like working out is a part of my transition. It helps my dysphoria, which we can talk about dysphoria
Yeah,
too.
I was gonna actually say, let's talk about dysphoria.
Yeah, dysphoria. So dysphoria is like this terrible feeling that some trans people have. Not all trans people have dysphoria. It's very important. What I would describe as like when you look in the mirror and you look at your body or parts of your body and you're just like, ugh, that's not me. A lot of my body dysphoria, like I said, was around my chest. Like even when I was like, before I realized I was trans, like I didn't like my chest. I would wear like sports bras.
Did you ever bind?
I did bind, and I think that was like a part of like why I pursued my top surgery like so freaking fast, is because binding sucks.
It can be painful. Right?
Sucks. Yeah, like I tried to tape, and it just like cut me up. Well, there's companies like Trans Tape. A lot of people use like KT tape, the like athletic like tendon tape. And like there is a way apparently to do it right, and so it doesn't pull, but it still like holds down your chest. But like I could not figure that out for the life of me. But yeah, dysphoria is a really, really, it could be a really, really debilitating thing for trans people who experience it. And a lot of like the ulterior like mental health things that we go through are like basically directly related to our dysphoria. So if we can have surgeries or pursue testosterone or work out or do things to eliminate that experience, what I've noticed in myself and like a lot of my friends who are trans, a lot of just like our other mental health stuff, like our depression or our like different like mental diagnoses that we may have that are unrelated to our gender, start to fall away after we stop experiencing like a ton of dysphoria all the time.
Right. So what is that experience of taking testosterone? Like what happens to your body? We know it's transitioning, but what is the unsaid of that, you know?
When I first, St. Louis is amazing, and we have a clinic that is like for queer people. I went for like one appointment that was just like a, hey, get to know you, and then I had another appointment and it was like, I'm considering pursuing testosterone. I was like dipping my toe in the water.
Okay.
I left that day with a prescription for testosterone, and like I remember sitting there with my doctor, and I like I said, DSM-5, you know, like fit all the diagnostics, have the history. I had a letter from my therapist and things like that too, but and I remember calling like Julia, my mom, and a couple of my best friends like right after I left that doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have a prescription for testosterone. And I just remember feeling like terrified, super happy, and terrified.
Because it was the beginning of a new journey.
Julia and I went back to the clinic, and they did it in my leg. They like, you know, showed her how to do it. Did it.
How often?
I do mine every Monday.
Okay, so weekly.
Once a week. Some people do theirs like once every 2 weeks, and you do more. I find that I have a little more balance if I do mine like.
So when you say balance, what do you mean by that? You know, I guess last thing, you know, I always want to do this. You know, I think sharing your story is incredibly important, and there are many out here that aren't able to step into their most authentic self just yet. But I am encouraged, and I'm hopeful that they will. And I feel like sometimes we just need some advice and some affirmation to say, you know, you can do it.
One of the biggest pieces of advice I would give transmasculine people is just like listen to yourself, forgive yourself. I remember when I realized I was trans and I was 29 years old, I felt so behind. And I was almost like upset with myself for not realizing this about myself sooner. The younger you pursue like hormone replacement therapy, the more like accelerated the effects or whatever. So I was like worried about that, you know. But I have friends who are trans who are closeted and they're like 72 years old. And if given the chance, like if they didn't have grandchildren or feel like a ton of cultural pressure not to transition, even at like the age of 72, they would. And so I would say it's never too late to start listening to yourself, forgiving yourself, honoring your body, honoring like who you are. I remember thinking of like, I remember being really, really little, like some early memories, and like looking into a mirror and just like wanting to see this like person that I now see in front of me.
Yeah.
And I just remember the like defeated feeling of like how it just wasn't going to be able to happen for me. And so yeah, I would just say like literally you could start today. And for me, I've lost a lot. Like we didn't really get into a lot of that. I've lost so much when I decided to transition. I've lost friends and people. I've like relationships have changed. Yeah, there's a part of my life and story and livelihood that most people just don't have access to, and that can be a really lonely way to live. But in my opinion, in my experience, it is lonelier to hide. And it's lonelier to settle, and it's lonelier to, yeah, just like wake up every day with that sort of like defeated, like I'm not really leaning into the world as the person I know that I am. And yeah, I live my life, I die my death, like I'm accountable for my life. And so I just took that step, and if you want to take that step, I encourage you to do that, because it's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
That was great. Max!
Thanks, Chloe. Thank you. This was so fun.
This was so great.
You rock.
You rock too.
Thanks.
All right, so we're signing out. Peace, peace.